On the train, Hinata reprimands some noisy students, reminding them to be considerate and leave space for an older lady to sit. She invites Takemichi to her home to help him study. Takemichi is excited as it's the first time he's been in a girl's room. Hinata expresses her gratitude for Takemichi helping Naoto the other day. She shares that their dad is often absent and Naoto used to dislike him, but now he aspires to be like him, a police officer. Takemichi realizes the reason behind Naoto's career choice and assures Hinata that Naoto will make a great police officer. Hinata notices a more mature side of Takemichi and expresses a desire to get to know him better. Suddenly, fireworks begin, and Hinata takes Takemichi to the rooftop to enjoy the view. Takemichi cherishes the moment and wishes not to return to the future without Hinata. He reaches out to hold her hand, but then realizes he's holding Naoto's hand and is transported back to the present. In the present, Takemichi wakes up, overwhelmed with emotion, and begins to cry. Naoto realizes that his theory about time travel via handshakes is correct. He speculates that something must have changed when Takemichi returned. Naoto reveals that Takemichi goes back precisely 12 years, and if he spends a week in the past, when he returns to the present, a week has also passed, during which his body remains in suspended animation. Takemichi informs Naoto that he met Manjiro Sano, which surprises Naoto, who questions why Manjiro didn't kill him. Takemichi suggests that they meet with Manjiro to learn why Toman changed. Naoto agrees, and observes that Takemichi appears to have shed his weak side. They search through documents to find a way to locate Manjiro, and Naoto notices someone unfamiliar. It's Atsushi Sendo, who has become a member of Toman's upper echelon. This puzzles Naoto since in his original timeline, Atsushi was arrested for stabbing Masataka Kiyomizu and later became an insignificant punk. They realize that Takemichi has altered the past after meeting Manjiro. They decide to contact Atsushi, who might help them arrange a meeting with Manjiro. Takemichi finds Atsushi's old phone number and contacts him, arranging to meet at the hostess bar Atsushi now manages. Naoto worries that Takemichi might have been too straightforward by mentioning they want to meet Manjiro, but Takemichi believes that true friendship endures. When they meet Atsushi, Takemichi initially doesn't recognize him because Atsushi has ditched his pompadour. Atsushi expresses his long wait for Takemichi's return and insists on a private conversation on the rooftop, reminiscing about their past. During their rooftop conversation, Takemichi mentions that Atsushi must be living a good life with all the money. However, Atsushi hints that some things money can't buy. He reveals that he knows Naoto is a cop and that he is Hinata's younger brother. Shockingly, Atsushi admits to pushing Takemichi onto the train tracks, but Naoto saved him, suggesting that Atsushi had foreknowledge of the event. Atsushi begins to question whether Takemichi can truly go back in time and seeks Naoto's assistance to understand the inexplicable situation. Atsushi believes that it sounds insane. Takemichi vehemently rejects the notion that Atsushi would try to kill him, emphasizing that they are friends. Atsushi then reveals that he serves Tetakisaki and explains that everyone in Toman follows his orders since they haven't seen Manjiro in years. He discloses that Manjiro changed after Ken Ryuguchi's death, pleading with Takemichi to return to the past and save everyone. In a shocking turn of events, Atsushi jumps from the rooftop, tragically ending his own life. This leaves Takemichi in tears. Unbeknownst to them, Teta Kisaki was eavesdropping on their entire conversation from the other end of the rooftop. Takemichi instructs Naoto to investigate the day of Ken Ryuguchi's death, as he believes that it was Teta Kisaki who played a pivotal role in corrupting Toman and turning it into an evil organization. Takemichi becomes determined to save everyone and make things right. Takemichi's life takes another hit when he goes to work, and Hasegawa, his boss, informs him that he has been fired for his 2-week absence. Hasegawa mentions that she took the blame during his absence. Takemichi worries about his pending payment, but Hasegawa assures him that he will receive it soon. Takemichi contemplates whether he should inform the past version of Hinata about the future events, but Naoto advises against it, warning that she might think he's crazy and come to dislike him. Naoto himself only believes Takemichi's time travel story because he was into occult topics in the past. With Atsushi Sendo now dead, their only option is to return to the past once more. Naoto discovers news reports about Ken Ryuguchi's death. On August 3rd, 2005, Ken died during a biker gang fight in which approximately 50 people were involved. The fight arose from internal conflicts between Manjiro and Ken's factions. Takemichi finds it hard to believe because Ken understood Manjiro better than anyone. Naoto suspects that there might be more to the story than what's reported. He asserts that Takemichi's current mission is to save Ken, which could prevent Manjiro from changing, and in turn, save Atsushi and Hinata from their grim fates. They agree on this mission, sealing the commitment with a handshake. When Takemichi opens his eyes, he finds himself in a karaoke room with a scantily dressed girl on top of him. As the phone in the room rings, he panics and makes a hasty escape. He realizes that his past life has already begun to change, but must ensure that Hinata doesn't discover the truth. At that moment, Hinata appears and expresses her concern about his recent odd behavior. She notes that he had been acting strangely since the day of the fireworks, where he ran away. She mentions that he seems more mature now. Ken calls Takemichi and invites him to Musashi Shrine, and Hinata decides to accompany him to the gathering. As they make their way to the shrine, Hinata asks Takemichi what's important to him. She shares that the most important thing to her is moments like these, spending time with him, even if they don't discuss important matters. This prompts Takemichi to realize that the most important thing to him is saving Hinata from her tragic fate. Upon their arrival at the shrine, they encounter several people with bikes, and two individuals aggressively demand that Takemichi leave because it's a Toman gathering. Takashi Mitsuya, the 2nd Division captain, recognizes Takemichi and reprimands the two for frightening the commander's guest. Takashi then escorts Takemichi and Hinata to meet Manjiro, who expresses his delight at Takemichi's attendance. Ken expresses concern that Takemichi brought Hinata with him. Ken immediately calls Emma and instructs her to protect Hinata since she's Takemichi's girlfriend. When Takemichi sees Emma, he realizes that she's the same girl from the karaoke incident. Emma teasingly calls him a wussy boy, confusing Hinata and raising Ken's suspicions about their connection. Takemichi claims not to remember what happened, and Emma recounts that he persuaded her to change into her underwear and then abruptly fled. Hinata gets furious with Takemichi and beats him up before storming off. Emma is surprised that he went with her when he already had Hinata and clarifies that she wasn't interested in him. She had hoped that Ken would get a bit angry, but he's solely focused on Manjiro, bikes, and fighting. The official Toman meeting begins, and Manjiro seeks the gang's opinions on the conflict with Moebius. Pachin and Peion confront Takemichi, still angry about the incident with Masataka Kiyomizu. Takashi advises them to let go of the Masataka matter. Ken intervenes and tells them to stop, and also urges Takemichi not to bear a grudge against Pachin. He explains that Pachin's friend got into trouble with Moebius, which ignited the conflict. Ken then reveals the disturbing reason behind the conflict. Moebius's leader, Nobutaka, brutally beat him, sexually assaulted his girlfriend in front of him, and even subjected his family to violence. Toman controls Shibuya, while Moebius dominates Shinjuku. Manjiro asks Pachin what he wants to do, and Pachin, consumed by rage, expresses his desire to fight and eliminate Moebius. Manjiro expected this response and questions the others if they are afraid or believe it's too much trouble to fight for Pachin's friend. However, their grinning faces indicate their readiness for the battle. Manjiro enthusiastically announces their plan to crush Moebius during the Musashi Festival on August 3rd. That night, Takemichi reflects on the situation. He is aware that on August 3rd, Ken dies in an internal conflict within Toman. Unable to make a decision, Takemichi initially decides to serve as Ken's bodyguard. However, Ken declines his offer the following day. Takemichi decides to follow Ken to better understand the situation. He tails Ken into a restaurant where Ken shares a meal with Manjiro. Manjiro becomes upset for not receiving a flag in his kid's meal, but Ken surprises him by producing one from his pocket, which brings a smile to Manjiro's face. After eating, Manjiro falls asleep, and Ken gently carries him. Ken heads to a hospital where Pachin's friend's girlfriend is admitted. She has been unconscious for 5 days. The girl's father arrives and angrily confronts Ken and Manjiro, blaming them for the condition his daughter is in. In response, Ken lowers his head in a gesture of remorse, while Manjiro, though getting angry, tells Ken there's no need to apologize. Ken intervenes, telling him to be quiet and declaring that they will take full responsibility for what happened. Eventually, the father breaks down in tears over his daughter's condition and leaves the hospital. Ken then reassures Manjiro that they should resolve their problems within their own world. He emphasizes that each of their gang members has important people in their lives, and they can't let innocent individuals be affected by their conflicts. Ken advises Manjiro that he doesn't need to lower his head, but should have a compassionate heart for others. Manjiro apologizes and expresses his gratitude for having Ken by his side. Takemichi, who has been listening nearby, realizes why Manjiro changed after Ken's death, and is confident that these two friends would never turn against each other. Naoto successfully locates Nobutaka at a construction site. Takemichi and Naoto approach Nobutaka, who is being scolded for his tardiness, and are surprised to discover that he used to be the commander of Moebius. Despite initial reluctance, Nobutaka eventually opens up and reveals that he did not order Ken's death. He explains that Ken's death served as a trigger for the internal conflicts within Toman, but emphasizes that it was all part of someone's plan to cause discord. As Nobutaka receives a call from his boss, he departs, leaving Takemichi and Naoto with the realization that someone manipulated the situation. Convinced by Nobutaka's sincerity, Naoto believes his account. Takemichi decides to return to the past to warn Mikey about the impending conflict. Upon returning to the past, Takemichi finds himself on a bike with Atsushi Sendo, relieved that Atsushi is still alive. He inquires about Atsushi's dreams, and Atsushi confides in his aspiration to become a hairstylist. Takemichi offers his support and belief in Atsushi's potential. After this conversation, Takemichi proceeds to meet with Manjiro, who is accompanied by Ken, Pachin, and Peion. Takemichi implores Mikey to call off the fight with Moebius, explaining that he has information about a plot behind the conflict, but cannot disclose his sources. Pachin becomes aggressive and starts physically attacking Takemichi. Mikey reaffirms his decision to confront Moebius, but Ken intervenes to stop Pachin from harming Takemichi. Ken suggests that they should gather more information about Moebius before proceeding with the fight. Manjiro questions whether Ken is now against Toman's course of action. Nobutaka Osanai unexpectedly arrives on the scene, asserting his seniority as someone 2 years older than the rest. This provokes Pachin, who rushes at Nobutaka. Nobutaka swiftly incapacitates Pachin with a punch, and humorously suggests that they rename themselves the Middle School Baby Alliance. He signals the arrival of the other Moebius members, who encircle the Toman members, intensifying the confrontation. Takemichi notices that Nobutaka Osanai appears to be the same person he encountered in the present. However, Nobutaka takes offense to Takemichi's gaze and hits him. Pachin intervenes and expresses his desire to fight Nobutaka, prompting Manjiro to instruct the others to watch the confrontation. Nobutaka faces off against Pachin and easily defeats him, leaving Pachin feeling inadequate. Nevertheless, Manjiro reassures Pachin that he didn't lose, and knocks out Nobutaka with a single kick. Manjiro declares that as long as they're part of Toman, they'll never lose to anyone. Nobutaka regains consciousness and grabs a broken bottle, charging at Ken and Manjiro. Ken swiftly stops him and tells Nobutaka that he lost because he violated the principles of being a delinquent by committing sexual assault and attacking someone's parents. Seeing the immense strength of Manjiro and Ken, the Moebius members start to fear them. Ken proclaims that Moebius will now be under Tokyo, Manji gang's control. As sirens approach, everyone flees the scene. Takemichi reflects on how things concluded relatively peacefully. Suddenly, Pachin stabs Nobutaka in the back, shocking everyone present. Pachin apologizes to Manjiro and instructs them to run, while he plans to turn himself in. While trying to escape, Takemichi loses consciousness. Takemichi awakens in the hospital, with Emma by his side. He worries about Manjiro and Ken, and while crying, Emma explains that they've ended up fighting due to Pachin's actions. Toman is now divided into the Manjiro faction and the Ken faction. During their conversation, Hinata arrives and misunderstands the situation. Takemichi spends 3 days at home recovering. Feeling bored, he completes a large puzzle. His friends visit him and inform him about the turmoil in Toman. They explain that Toman is in a precarious situation, and the division between the Ken and Manjiro factions is widening. However, they quickly burst into laughter and reveal that Ken and Manjiro frequently engage in fights. During the visit, Ken surprises everyone by arriving with a watermelon. While they enjoy the fruit, Ken shares that Pachin will be held for a year, and Nobutaka is alive. Takemichi inquires about Manjiro, which infuriates Ken. Ken slams the table, disrupting Takemichi's puzzle. Ken expresses his frustration and declares that he's done with Manjiro, and Toman is on the brink of splitting. He leaves Takemichi's house. As Ken exits, he encounters Manjiro. Both of them are taken aback and wonder why the other is present. They both claim to be there to visit Takemichi, who is their friend. Despite Takemichi's attempts to mediate, Ken grows annoyed. Manjiro grabs Takemichi's bike and hurls it at Ken, who narrowly dodges it, causing the bike to collide with a wall. Ken grabs a baseball bat and destroys it. They continue to argue and prepare for a fight, inadvertently breaking Takemichi's cherished possessions. Takemichi becomes frustrated and commands them to stop.